The bloodiest ambush in history, Hannibal's trap that annihilated 80,000 Romans at Cannae. Did you know that one of the greatest military disasters in human history began on a calm summer morning in southern Italy? It was August 2nd, 216 BC. The plains near a small town called Cannae shimmered under the rising sun. Thousands of Roman soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, their red shields glinting in the light, their faces set with confidence. They believed this would be the day they crushed a foreign invader named Hannibal Barca once and for all. But what they did not know was that they were marching straight into a masterpiece of death crafted by one of the greatest military minds who ever lived. Let's float back to the beginning of this story, almost 2 years earlier. The Second Punic War had erupted between Rome and Carthage, two powers locked in a brutal struggle for control of the Mediterranean. Hannibal, a young Carthaginian general from North Africa, had sworn an oath to his father that he would never be a friend of Rome. He took that vow seriously. In 218 BC, he did the unthinkable. He led an army complete with elephants across the Alps. The journey was a nightmare of ice, avalanches, and ambushes. Nearly half his force perished, but those who survived descended into Italy like ghosts of vengeance. And once there, Hannibal began a campaign that would humiliate the greatest republic on earth, Attrition. He lured the Romans into icy rivers and crushed them with a hidden flank attack. At Lake Trasimene, he ambushed an entire Roman army in the morning fog, killing or capturing over 30,000 men. By the time news reached Rome, fear had turned to panic. Yet the Senate, proud and stubborn, refused to negotiate. They raised more armies, believing sheer numbers could end Hannibal's threat once and for all. Now we move to the year 216 BC. The Roman Republic gathered the largest force it had ever fielded, nearly 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. The two consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro, commanded them. The Romans were determined to confront Hannibal head-on in a test of brute strength. Meanwhile, Hannibal's Carthaginian army numbered barely half that. Around 50,000 men, Africans, Spaniards, Gauls, and a handful of Numidian horsemen. But what Hannibal lacked in size, he made up for with brilliance. He studied the Roman temperament, their hunger for direct confrontation, their impatience, their pride. And so he decided to turn those very qualities into a weapon against them. On the open fields near Cannae, the two armies prepared for battle. The Roman camp, crowded and restless, stretched along the river Aufidus. Dust hung over the plain like a veil. The air was dry and the wind carried the taste of sand. Roman soldiers tightened their grips on their shields, whispering about glory and vengeance. They saw the enemy's smaller ranks and felt certain of victory. But Hannibal had already chosen the ground. He placed his army in a crescent formation, thin in the center, strong on the wings. His Gaul and Iberian infantry formed the middle line, while his hardened African veterans waited on the flanks. Behind them, the cavalry under his brother Hasdrubal and the fierce Numidian riders stood ready to strike. The trap was set. As dawn broke, Varro, commanding that day, ordered a full advance. The Roman legions surged forward like a human tide. Shield pressed against shield, they forced Hannibal's center to bend backward. It looked like victory. The Roman commanders believed the enemy was collapsing. But in truth, the Carthaginian center was bending exactly as Hannibal had planned. Slowly, deliberately, the Romans pushed deeper. The crescent shape closed around them. And as they pressed forward, the wings of Hannibal's army began to curl inward like jaws of a predator closing around its prey. Let's drift over to the left flank for a moment. Hasdrubal's cavalry had already smashed through the Roman horsemen. They wheeled behind the Roman lines, circling around to strike the enemy from the rear. On the right, Numidian riders harassed and scattered any Romans trying to escape. Within minutes, the great Roman army was surrounded on all sides. It was the first recorded example of the double envelopment tactic, a maneuver so perfect that it is still studied in military academies today. The plain of Cannae turned into a killing ground. There was no room to fight, no room to breathe. The Roman soldiers were packed so tightly that they couldn't swing their swords. Those at the front died by the thousands, cut down by Hannibal's veterans. Those behind could do nothing but press forward, suffocating in the crush of bodies. As the sun climbed higher, the dust mixed with blood. Polybius, the Greek historian who later chronicled the event, wrote that the Romans died not in combat but in confusion, trapped, helpless, and crushed by their own numbers. When night finally fell, the battlefield was silent. Over 50,000 Romans lay dead. Another 10,000 were taken prisoner. It was, and remains, the single bloodiest day in the long history of ancient warfare. Hannibal had destroyed the pride of Rome in a single afternoon. The bloodiest ambush in history, aftermath of Cannae. As night fell over the plains of Cannae, the moonlight revealed a sea of silence broken only by the groans of the dying. The dust had settled, but the horror remained. Tens of thousands of Roman bodies lay scattered across the field, their red cloaks stained dark with blood. In the faint light, one could see the discipline of Rome turned into ruin. Legionary standard symbols of Roman honor were trampled into the dirt. The Roman Republic had just suffered the most catastrophic defeat in its history. Let's move quietly through the aftermath. Hannibal's men, exhausted but victorious, walked among the fallen. Even the hardened veterans of Africa and Spain were stunned by what they saw. Some Romans had suffocated, crushed by the press of their own comrades. Others died with their swords still in hand, their faces locked in disbelief. Hannibal ordered the burial of his own dead first, a rare gesture of respect, before gathering the spoils from the Roman camp. In the Carthaginian tent that night, the victory was complete, but Hannibal himself was calm. He had achieved what few commanders in history ever would. With fewer men, on foreign soil, he had annihilated the largest army Rome had ever assembled. Yet even in triumph, Hannibal's generals urged him to march on Rome immediately. According to later accounts, his cavalry commander Hannibal told him, "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but not how to use it." But Hannibal refused to march. His army was tired, his supply lines long. He knew Rome's walls were strong and her spirit unbroken. To attack without siege equipment would be suicide. Instead, he chose a different path, one of strategy, patience, and psychological war. He expected Rome to sue for peace. Let's float over now to Rome itself. News of the disaster arrived like a thunderclap. When the messengers entered the city, people crowded the streets, desperate for word of their loved ones. But the message was short and devastating. Out of 80,000 men, almost none had survived. Both consuls were gone, Paulus dead on the field. Varro fled with a few thousand survivors. The Senate ordered public mourning, but panic threatened to tear the city apart. Some citizens suggested abandoning Italy altogether. Others whispered that the gods had cursed them. Yet, in one of the most remarkable moments in Roman history, the Republic refused to surrender. There would be no peace, no negotiation. The Senate forbade even the purchase of ransom for the captured soldiers. Instead, they turned tragedy into resolve. Every man of age was ordered to take up arms. Slaves were promised freedom if they fought. Boys too young for the legions were drafted into service. Even women donated jewelry to fund new armies. Rome, wounded but alive, began to rebuild from ashes. Meanwhile, in southern Italy, Hannibal was trying to turn victory into strategy. City after city trembled. Some, like Capua, the second largest city in Italy, opened its gates to him, hoping to share in his success. But others stayed loyal to Rome, fearful of what surrender might bring. Hannibal knew that Rome's strength was not just in its armies, but in its alliances. If he could break those, he could break Rome itself. For the next 2 years, he swept across southern Italy, taking strongholds and defeating more Roman legions in battle. But with each victory, something became clear: Rome would not give up. Even after Cannae, the Senate refused to meet Hannibal on his terms. They avoided open battles, adopting a slow, grinding war of attrition. Let's drift now to the Roman commander who would change the tide. His name was Quintus Fabius Maximus, known to history as Cunctator, the Delayer. Fabius had seen what direct confrontation brought, so instead of attacking Hannibal, he shadowed him. He harassed his foraging parties, cut off his supplies, and refused to give battle. Romans mocked him at first, calling him cowardly. But over time, his strategy began to work. Hannibal's army, deep in enemy territory, began to suffer. He lacked reinforcements from Carthage, which was distracted by politics and jealous rivals. His Italian allies were loyal only when convenient. And his soldiers, once inspired by endless victories, now faced hunger and exhaustion. Still, the shadow of Cannae lingered. Polybius wrote that Rome had lost 20% of its adult male population that day, a wound no nation could forget. Entire families were wiped out. The list of the dead filled scroll after scroll in the Senate records. The psychological impact of Cannae was immense. Every Roman boy who later became a soldier grew up hearing the name Hannibal whispered with awe and fear. Meanwhile, Hannibal used the battlefield itself as a message. He sent the gold rings of Roman senators and knights killed at Cannae back to Carthage in a single sack, a silent declaration that Rome's nobility had fallen before him. In Carthage, the news was greeted with jubilation. But instead of sending reinforcements to finish the war, the Carthaginian council hesitated. Some envied Hannibal's fame. Others doubted he could conquer Rome outright. Their hesitation would change history. Let's move across the years that followed. While Hannibal remained undefeated on Italian soil, Rome began to rise again. It rebuilt its legions, retook lost cities, and slowly surrounded Hannibal's allies. The Roman navy, still dominant, cut off supplies from Africa and Spain. Step by step, Rome learned from its defeats. And as strange as it may seem, the tragedy of Cannae became the foundation of Rome's future strength. Out of disaster, the Republic discovered endurance. Its leaders studied Hannibal's tactics, adapting and improving. They transformed their rigid formations into flexible ones, more capable of handling enemy flanks. And their soldiers learned not to rely solely on numbers, but on discipline and coordination. Meanwhile, Hannibal, still undefeated in battle, began to lose the war. He had won every major engagement, but failed to break Rome's spirit. As the years passed, his army dwindled. Yet, even as his fortunes faded, the legend of Cannae only grew stronger. That day in 216 BC would be remembered for centuries, not just as a defeat, but as a lesson in genius and arrogance, in strategy and pride. Let's move forward now, deeper into the long shadow that Cannae cast across the ancient world. Years had passed since that terrible day. Yet its echo still haunted every Roman decision, every Senate meeting, every young commander who rose through the ranks. The fields of Cannae had become sacred ground not of glory, but of warning. Rome had learned the price of pride, and it would never forget. Meanwhile, Hannibal remained in Italy, his presence like a ghost that Rome could not exorcise. For 15 years he moved across the peninsula, undefeated in open battle. He roamed the hills of Campania, crossed into Apulia, and even wintered in Capua, the city that had welcomed him after his victory. But time, more than any legion, had turned against him. Let's float over to the Senate chambers of Carthage. Inside, the mood had changed. What began as admiration for Hannibal's genius had turned into jealousy and division. The ruling council, dominated by merchants and politicians, hesitated to give him full support. They sent only limited reinforcements, ships, and funds. Many believed Hannibal's war was too distant, too risky. Without supplies or fresh troops, his brilliant campaign began to wither. Rome, on the other hand, transformed pain into precision. After Cannae, it abandoned reckless ambition and learned patience. The Romans rebuilt their armies slowly, creating smaller, more disciplined units. They focused on allies, diplomacy, and steady conquest. They sent one commander, Publius Cornelius Scipio, the son of a fallen general, to Spain. There, Scipio would learn the lessons of Cannae and turn them against Hannibal himself. Meanwhile, in Italy, Hannibal's situation worsened. His troops, drawn from many nations, were growing weary. His Numidian cavalry returned to Africa. Local allies began to betray him under pressure from Roman forces. One by one, cities that had opened their gates to him were retaken by Rome. Even Capua, his most prized ally, was besieged and captured. The Romans slaughtered its leaders and enslaved its people. Hannibal could do nothing to save them. He had no siege engines, no reinforcements, and no allies powerful enough to challenge Rome's resurgence. He was a genius trapped by distance fighting not just an army, but an entire civilization that refused to die. Now we move to 204 BC. After nearly 15 years in Italy, Hannibal received devastating news. Scipio, now a brilliant general, had landed in North Africa. For the first time, Carthage itself was under threat. The hunter had become the hunted. Hannibal was recalled home. As his ships crossed the sea, he must have looked back toward Italy, that land of victories and lost opportunities. He had marched across the Alps, destroyed Roman armies, and shattered their pride, yet Rome still stood. The war that had begun with fire and triumph would now end in defense and desperation. Let's drift over to the plains near Zama in 202 BC here. The two greatest military minds of their age finally faced each other, Hannibal Barca and Scipio Africanus. Hannibal was now in his late 40s, his face weathered by years of campaign. Scipio, young and ambitious, carried the legacy of every Roman slain at Cannae. The battle was fierce but different. Scipio had studied Hannibal's tactics and learned from them. He neutralized the Carthaginian elephants, held his cavalry in reserve, and used flexible formations to outmaneuver the Carthaginian wings. When the dust settled, Hannibal's army lay broken. The double envelopment that once destroyed 80,000 Romans was now turned against its creator. Carthage surrendered soon after, ending the Second Punic War. But history, as it often does, gave Hannibal a strange kind of immortality. Though defeated, he became a symbol of military genius. Polybius Livy, and later Roman historians men from the very nation he once nearly destroyed, wrote of him with reluctant admiration. Even centuries later, generals from Napoleon to Patton studied the Battle of Cannae as a blueprint for victory. Let's pause and reflect on what Cannae truly meant. It was more than just a slaughter, it was a turning point in the psychology of empire. It showed that numbers alone could not guarantee victory. It proved that intelligence, timing, and understanding of human behavior could reshape entire wars. Hannibal's formation that day, a thin crescent that closed upon its enemy, became the eternal symbol of tactical perfection. Yet, the tragedy was that even perfection could not defeat persistence. Hannibal had won battles that should have ended nations, but Rome's will was stronger than any strategy. The Republic's endurance outlasted brilliance. That was the true lesson of Cannae. Genius can win a day, but discipline can win a century. Years later, after his exile from Carthage, Hannibal continued to advise foreign kings, forever restless, forever plotting against Rome. But the Roman reach grew longer. They demanded his surrender. Rather than face capture, he took poison around 183 BC. His final words, recorded by legend, were calm, asterisk. Let us free this world from its fear of an old man, asterisk. Meanwhile, Rome transformed its grief into power. By the 1st century BC, it ruled not only Italy but Spain, Greece, and North Africa, the same lands once marched by Hannibal. The ghosts of Cannae were buried beneath layers of triumph. Yet, among Roman generals and historians, there remained a quiet reverence for the man who had taught them the meaning of strategy. Let's float back one last time to that field in southern Italy. The winds still whisper across the plains of Cannae. The earth, once soaked with blood, lies peaceful now, dotted with olive trees. But beneath that soil sleeps a memory, the day when a single mind reshaped the art of war, when courage met calculation, and when the pride of a republic nearly fell to the genius of one man. And though the Roman Empire would rise to dominate the world, it carried forever a scar called Cannae, reminder that even the mightiest can be humbled, and that history itself can be shaped by a single morning under an Italian sun. In 216 BC, Hannibal Barca faced the might of Rome on the plains of Cannae, and turned the greatest army on earth into a trap of their own making. With a single genius maneuver, he surrounded and annihilated over 70,000 Romans in one day. It was the bloodiest ambush in ancient history, a battle still studied by generals to this day. Witness the day Rome nearly fell, and the genius that changed warfare forever.